Beneath Virginia's quiet landscapes lie secrets older than the colonies. Lost peoples, enigmatic stones, haunted graves, and legends written in the land itself. These are Virginia's ancient mysteries. Strange, forgotten, and remains inexplicable. Greetings from Virginia's old mysteries. Dion Rock Connection. The Dion Rock Connection, a stone engraved with ancient folklore and colonial history, is buried in the forgotten eddies that weathered and cloaked in mystery. The Dion Rock is a 40-ton boulder that was extracted from the Tatum River in Massachusetts, covered in cryptic carvings that have baffled scholars for centuries. What if, however, the rock isn't special? What if similar stones marked with strange symbols worn by centuries and dismissed as curiosities exist deep in Virginia's riverbeds and forests? Some believe they do, and they might hold the key to rewriting early American history. Virginia, with its vast river networks and ancient trail systems, was once the center of a complex web of trade, travel, and sacred movement. Long before Jamestown, long before European ships ever kissed the Chesapeake Bay, cultures moved through the land, leaving behind stories not written in books, but in stone. That's where the Dion Rock Connection comes in. The original Dion Rock is infamous because no one can agree who carved it. Its inscriptions include pictographs, symbols, and cryptic letters. Over the centuries, theories have ranged from the plausibility, the wildly speculative. Native Americans, Norse explorers, Portuguese navigators, Phoenicians, even ancient Chinese sailors. Every line in the stone has been debated, measured, and mapped. But in Virginia, the echoes of this mystery go unnoticed, except by those who have studied the signs. Scattered across the Tidewater and Piedmont regions, a handful of unusual stones have been discovered. Stones with inscriptions no one can definitively explain. Some lie submerged in rivers. Others were found on old farms beneath centuries of soil or built into colonial foundations. A few have been destroyed or lost over time, but those that remain bear uncanny similarities to the Dion Rock geometric shapes, looping spirals, and characters that defy easy translation. Take, for example, a slab pulled from the banks of the Rappahannock River in the 1800s. It was covered in a sequence of intersecting lines and circles arranged with almost mathematical precision. Locals called it a witch stone and avoided it, claiming it brought bad luck. But early antiquarians sketched its markings and noted similarities to Old World alphabets, possibly Norse runes or Iberian script. Unfortunately, that stone vanished during a flood, never to be seen again. Another was found near the James River, half buried in a wooded slope, etched with what appeared to be a depiction of a ship, not a canoe, a full-masted vessel with sails and hull details. And next to it, symbols, some resembling OM, the ancient Irish alphabet carved into stones across the British Isles. That stone, too, is now gone, taken by a private collector or destroyed in a construction project, depending on who you ask. But not all have disappeared. In a small museum tucked away in the Blue Ridge foothills, there's a sandstone slab referred to simply as the Kecton Rock found in the early 1900s near a native encampment. It features a combination of petroglyphs, suns, stars, zigzag lines, and what appears to be a humanoid figure with elongated arms stretching toward a triangular object in the sky. Some archaeologists say it's native in origin, a ceremonial record or mythic scene. Others argue the style is unlike any known indigenous art from the region and suggest it might predate the tribes we associate with Virginia entirely. So what do these stones mean, and what connects them to Dion Rock? One theory suggests that all these inscribed stones, whether in Massachusetts, Virginia, or even as far away as West Virginia, are part of a hidden map left behind by pre-Columbian explorers who traveled inland along rivers, leaving carved waypoints. If true, it would imply that long-distance oceanic contact with the Americas didn't begin in 1492, but centuries or even millennia earlier. The Norse are often at the center of these theories. We know they reached Newfoundland around the year 1000. But did they go farther south? Norse sagas speak of a lush land called Vinland, filled with grapes and mild winters, features that fit the Chesapeake region far better than icy Canada. If they traveled down the coast, Virginia would have been a logical stop. Did they carve their stories into rock before vanishing into legend? Then there's the Portuguese theory, specifically the idea that Portuguese explorers, possibly under the secret orders of the Templars or the Order of Christ, reached America decades before Columbus. Supporters of this theory point to a supposed connection between the carvings on die and rock and 16th century Portuguese naval symbols. And here's where things get even more tangled. Some believe a secret expedition may have sailed up the Chesapeake into Virginia's rivers, leaving symbolic messages behind, cryptic proof of a forbidden journey. It sounds wild, and maybe it is. But when you place Virginia's mystery stones alongside dike and rock, strange coincidences emerge. The same pattern of marginalization, dismissal by mainstream historians, loss of artifacts, and unexplained disappearances. The same layered mix of cultural fingerprints, symbols that resemble indigenous art, but also echoes of Mediterranean, Nordic, and even Asian writing systems. And most importantly, the same lingering question, who carved these stones and why? Skeptics argue that many of the stones are misunderstood native petroglyphs or the result of natural erosion. And while it's true that the region is rich with indigenous rock art, many of these mystery stones feature motifs not seen in traditional tribal carvings. Some are cut with tools far sharper than stone, possibly metal tools not believed to be present until Europeans arrived. And if the erosion patterns are any clue, still the mainstream stays quiet. The stones lie forgotten in basements, barns, or buried beneath new construction. And that may be the greatest tragedy of all. Not just that we might have early contact evidence in our hands, but that we're ignoring it. Perhaps one day someone will stumble across a new stone, one with markings so clear, so undeniable that it forces a reckoning. Or perhaps the secret will stay buried, locked in the earth, waiting for someone who knows how to read a message written not in ink, but in time-worn stone. Until then, the die in rock sits behind glass in a Massachusetts museum, silent, cryptic, and maybe not alone. The Saponi tribe, the disappearance of the Saponi tribe. In the rolling hills of central Virginia, where forests whisper with forgotten tongues and rivers carry memories older than maps, there once lived a proud and powerful people, the Saponi tribe. They were part of the Sown and speaking nations of the East, known for their hunting skill, deep spiritual traditions, and fiercely guarded independence. For centuries, they called the region around the present-day cities of Lynchburg and Charlottesville home. But sometime in the 1700s, they began to vanish. Not all at once, not in war, but slowly, almost invisible. By the close of the 18th century, the Saponi were no longer listed on maps or censuses. No great battle, no massacre, no clear migration, just an absence like smoke blown away by wind. So, what happened to the Saponi? To most historians, the answer is assimilation. Records show that some Saponi joined with related tribes like the Tutelo and Monaco. Others moved northward and were later absorbed into the Iroquois Confederacy. A few merged into colonial society, taking on English names, marrying into European or African families. Their cultural identity gradually erased by pressure, necessity, or design. But to the people who still carry Saponi blood, and to the storytellers who listen, there's another version, one that speaks not of disappearance, but of deliberate concealment. According to oral traditions passed down through generations, not all the Saponi left. Some stayed, slipping beneath the surface of recorded history. And not just figuratively, legends tell of an exodus into the underground, literally retreating into hidden cave systems beneath the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Piedmont Plateau, a secret refuge beneath the earth, away from colonists, soldiers, and forced relocation. These tales aren't as far-fetched as they sound. Virginia's geology is riddled with limestone caves and natural tunnels, some stretching for miles beneath the forest floor. Locals speak of passages that connect entire valleys, of echoing chambers so large they feel like cathedrals, and of sudden cold spots in the woods where ancient vents breathe mist year-round. The Lurai Caverns and Grand Caverns, both discovered in the 1800s, are tourist attractions today, But many similar formations remain unexplored, sealed off, or too remote to reach without specialized equipment. Some elders say the Saponi knew these caverns well. They used them long before colonists arrived for storage, ritual, and travel during times of conflict. When European pressure mounted, they simply retreated into what they already understood. They disappeared not into another land, but into the land itself. This idea is echoed in the story of the Night of the Vanishing Fires. According to one version, colonial scouts once camped near a Saponi village, nestled along the Stuntun River. But when they crept in by dawn, they found nothing. No people, no bodies, just extinguished hearts and a strange silence. Tracks led to a nearby ravine, then stopped abruptly. The soldiers searched for hours, but found no trace. Locals claimed the Saponi had melted into the rocks. Are these just folktales? Maybe, but clues linger. Old surveyor journals from the 1700s mentioned finding unusual structures deep in the mountains, stacked stone walls underground, ceremonial-looking loves, and strange paintings in red ochre. One explorer, a man named Ambrose Wills, wrote of hearing voices in the rock while camping near what's now George Washington National Forest. He claimed to see faint lights at night, lanterns perhaps moving through cracks in the cliffs. Over the centuries, local residents have reported similar sightings. Strange rhythmic drumming heard in places with no trails. Flickering lights dancing across hillsides. Children claiming to see people watching them from behind trees. Silent figures dressed in deer skin, vanishing when approached. Superstition probably, but taken together, they form a pattern. A pattern that suggests something ancient remains hidden. Then there's the question of the Sapone's spiritual beliefs. Like many Eastern Woodlands peoples, the Saponi believed in a world layered with unseen forces. For them, the land wasn't just territory. It was alive. Certain caves were seen as portals between realms. When someone died, their spirit passed through the earth, not above it. Some caves were never entered casually. They were sacred, used for ceremony, vision quests, and burial. A tribe facing extinction might well retreat into those sanctuaries, hoping to wait out the storm of colonial expansion or to simply preserve what they could in secrecy. It's possible they never planned to vanish forever. Maybe the idea was survival and hiding, waiting for a time when their culture could reemerge. But that time never came. Generation after generation passed in concealment, and the stories began to fade until all that remained were whispers. And yet, the Saponi haven't truly vanished. In recent decades, descendants have begun reclaiming their heritage. Saponi identifying communities exist today in both Virginia and North Carolina. They carry family stories of names changed to hide identity, of secret traditions kept alive in basements and backwoods, of great-grandparents who knew things they shouldn't. Some of these families are relearning the old languages, reviving dances, and tracing their ancestry through church records, DNA, and hidden archives. But for many, the biggest clue lies not in documents, but in the land itself. There are still places in Virginia where GPS fails, where compasses spin, where the trees grow in tight, unnatural spirals, places where time feels thin and the air tastes like stone. Some believe these are markers. Natural camouflage for entrances long sealed. A few modern explorers armed with caving gear and old maps have tried to find them. Some return shaken. Some don't return at all. One cryptic blog post from 2009, now scrubbed from the internet, described discovering a sealed stone doorway deep in a hollow north of Appomattox. Carved into it allegedly was a symbol, a serpent wrapped around a tree with 3 stars above. The explorer said he felt watched. He left quickly. Days later, the blog was gone. It could be fiction or it could be something else. An unbroken thread from a people who chose silence over surrender. In the end, maybe that's the point. The Saponi didn't vanish. They escaped from war, from disease, from eraser. They left behind a riddle, not a story of conquest or defeat, but of resistance through invisibility. And somewhere beneath the ancient stones of Virginia, that riddle waits. Not to be solved, but to be remembered. The Thomas Jefferson Stone circles. The Thomas Jefferson Stone circles. Long before he was president, before the Declaration, before Monticello crowned its hill, Thomas Jefferson was something else. A curious man obsessed with the mysteries of the land. He was a scientist, a philosopher, and in many ways America's first archaeologist. But buried in the more obscure corners of his writings lies something odd, something rarely taught in classrooms. Jefferson spoke briefly, but with fascination of stone circles near his Virginia estate, rings of carefully placed rocks arranged in deliberate patterns. He didn't know who built them, but he sensed they were ancient. And if what he observed is what some researchers believe, then the mystery stretches far deeper than anyone expected. The story begins at Monticello, Jefferson's plantation, overlooking the Ravena River. The land surrounding it is steeped in layers of history, native settlements, colonial skirmishes, and older traces still half buried beneath red clay and oak roots. Jefferson knew this. He spent years studying the ground beneath his feet, even famously excavating a native burial mound with his own hands. But in a set of lesser-known personal letters and marginal notes, Jefferson described stumbling upon a peculiar feature during one of his surveys. Circles of stones deliberately arranged in rings, some as wide as 30 feet, others barely 10. These weren't the result of plowing or building, he insisted. They predated European farming. They had no obvious purpose. No wells, no graves, no fences, just circles, quiet and unmarked, aligned in strange ways with no clear explanation. Jefferson didn't have a name for them, but he believed they were significant, possibly ceremonial, possibly astronomical. That was in the 1770s. Over 2 centuries later, those circles, if they still exist, are no longer marked on any map. But the idea didn't vanish. In fact, it may have reemerged under different names. Across central Virginia, particularly in Albemarle, Orange, and Fluenna counties, there are scattered accounts of farmers and hikers discovering similar rings, rocks placed in arcs or full loops, sometimes partially buried, sometimes in perfect alignment with natural features like river bends or mountain notches. In many cases, the stones are covered in lichen, undisturbed for generations. And when plotted against solar charts, some align with the solstices or equinoxes, just as ancient stone circles in Britain and Northern Europe often do. Could Jefferson have stumbled upon prehistoric observatories? Were these Virginia's answer to Stonehenge, built not with towering megaliths, but with humble stones and deep knowledge? It's not as unlikely as it sounds. Native American cultures across the continent mark time and direction with incredible precision. The ancestral Paloins of the Southwest tracked lunar standstills with shadow casting spirals. The Mississippian mound builders aligned entire cities with cardinal points and celestial events. In the eastern woodlands, traditions of solar calendars existed, though most were oral, not carved in stone. So why not in Virginia? The Monacan and Saponin tribes once dominated the central region of the state. Their spiritual lives were deeply tied to the stars, seasons, and cycles of nature. Ceremonial spaces, including cleared circles and post-lead rings, have been documented by archaeologists. But stone circles, that's where things get murkier. Unlike in the British Isles, native cultures here didn't usually build in stone, at least not in ways that survive easily. But that doesn't mean they never did. Some theorists suggest that the stone circles Jefferson saw, and others still whispered about in rural Virginia, could be the work of a much older culture. One predating known tribes, a Protoan group, or something even more enigmatic, a vanished people whose records lie only in myth and geology. One circle reportedly located near the confluence of the James and Rana rivers was described in an 1891 county survey as a ring of stone precisely placed with a single gap due east. No one knows what happened to it. Development, erosion, or time may have erased it. Another near Sugar Hollow was found by a group of Boy Scouts in the 1950s. 20 or more flat stones set in a spiral with a central pit filled with ash and bone fragments. Officials dismissed it as a settler's fire pit, but locals weren't convinced. They claimed the site had always been avoided by livestock and that strange lights were seen there on midsummer nights. And that's the other layer to this mystery. The phenomena folklore attached to these stone circles is persistent and eerie. Stories of flickering blue lights, sudden silences in the forest, compasses spinning out of control, and the feeling shared by many of being watched. One local tale from the 1930s tells of a circle near Carter's Mountain where no birds would land and no snow would stay. Hikers who ventured too close claimed to lose track of time, some returning hours later with no memory of where they'd been. Another story, this one from the 1970s, involves a University of Virginia student researching Jefferson's land surveys. He claimed to have found a circle perfectly intact, hidden in the woods northeast of Monticello. He took photographs, made rubbings, and marked the coordinates. But before he could publish, he disappeared. Not literally. He simply withdrew from the project, moved west, never spoke about it again. The documents, if they exist, were never made public. Some researchers believe the mystery has been deliberately buried, not by some shadowy government agency, but by time, land development, and the prioritization of European history over native and prehistoric truth. Old-growth forest was cleared, farmland plowed, subdivisions built. The stones were scattered, carted off, or left behind unnoticed. Still, a few dedicated amateur archaeologists and indigenous historians continue the search. Using Jefferson's vague notes, satellite imaging, and oral traditions, they've begun to piece together a possible network site where stones once marked solstice sunrises, seasonal gatherings, or burial rites. They believe that Jefferson didn't just find one circle. He may have stumbled onto a system, a whole constellation of sacred sites hidden in plain sight. And perhaps that's what fascinated him most. Jefferson, for all his contradictions, believed the land itself was a record, a book written by hands long gone, waiting to be read. He may not have understood the full meaning of what he found, but he knew it mattered. In the end, the mystery of Virginia's stone circles and Jefferson's brief, tantalizing mention of them raises more questions than answers. Were they astronomical tools, ceremonial grounds, boundary markers, or warnings? One thing is clear: the land remembers. The soil still holds secrets. The trees still grow around patterns we've forgotten. And somewhere in the quiet hills of Albemarle County, where mist clings to the fields and shadows stretch just a little too long, stones still whisper the stories Thomas Jefferson once tried to hear. The natural chimneys, unnatural chimneys, and ancient star worship, towering like the weathered pillars of some forgotten temple. The natural chimneys of Augusta County rise suddenly from the Virginia countryside. 7 massive limestone columns, some over 120 foot tall, jutting out of the earth like the fossilized fingers of ancient gods. To tourists, it's a quirky geological site, a natural oddity tucked into the Shenandoah Valley. But to those who've studied the legends, patterns, and energies surrounding these spires, the chimneys are far more than stone. They may be remnants of an ancient ritual ground built not by hand, but by time and worship, a sacred place where sky and stone once spoke the same language, a site of star worship. Geologists say the chimneys formed over 500 million years ago when layers of sedimentary rock, limestone, and dolomite were shaped by erosion, tectonic uplift, and time. Rain, wind, and subterranean forces carved these strange towers. That's the scientific explanation, and it's not wrong, but it's also only half the story. Long before colonial settlers arrived in the valley, the land surrounding the chimneys was home to indigenous peoples, likely the ancestors of the Monin, Titilo, and Saponi. For them, these stone formations were more than scenic. They were sacred. Oral histories passed down through Monacan elders speak of the standing ancestors, stone beings who watched the stars and carried messages between worlds. The site was believed to be a meeting place between sky spirits and earth people, a portal of sorts where rituals could bring harmony or warning depending on the movement of the stars above. And the stars are key. The chimneys are uniquely placed. When plotted against solar and lunar paths, their arrangement begins to resemble an observatory. During the summer solstice, sunlight passes between 2 of the tallest towers at sunrise, casting a long shadow that points directly toward a nearby hilltop. As settlers pushed inland from the coast, they brought with them deep superstitions. Witchcraft wasn't just feared, it was hunted. And while Grace was the only woman formally tried in Virginia, there are tales of others who weren't so lucky. In nearby cemeteries, some overgrown, others still in use, there are unmarked graves with unusual features, stones laid flat instead of upright, buried deep instead of shallow, or placed outside the traditional bounds of consecrated land. One old tale speaks of a woman named Eliza W., who died under suspicious circumstances in the late 1600s. Her grave, supposedly near the woods off Princess and Road, is said to hum during thunderstorms. Another speaks of a Blackaid healer buried beneath a barn foundation whose resting place was never blessed and whose name was erased from the family Bible. All of them share the same pattern. No church burial, no ceremony, no name, just quiet exile beneath the soil. It's said that when you walk through those graveyards on certain nights, the headstones shift ever so slightly. Names fade in return. Winds blow against the trees, but not the grass. And if you stand still, you might hear whispers, not of words, but of breath, close to your ear and gone in a blink. And still, it's Grace who holds the center of the story. For years, no marker stood for her, no memorial. But in 2006, 300 years after her trial, Virginia formally pardoned Grace Sherwood. A statue was erected in her honor near Centaur Independence Hospital in Virginia Beach. It shows her holding a basket of herbs, her expression calm, almost amused, like she knows something we don't. It's a beautiful tribute, but it's not where the real gravity lies. Locals say that if you want to find Grace's presence, you don't go to the statue. You go to the swamp where the Lynnhaven waters still curl like dark fingers through the marsh. You go to the fields where nothing grows quite right. You go to the tree that shouldn't still be standing. And if you really want to understand the weight of her story, you stand beneath that twisted tree on the anniversary of her ducking July 10th. That's when the air grows still. That's when the crickets stop chirping. That's when even the skeptics say something's watching. Whether it's Grace or just the echo of injustice, one thing is clear. The land remembers, and it marks its deadly when they were betrayed. The witch graves of Pungo are more than just ghost stories. They are scars, not on the land, but on the collective memory of a region that once let fear become law. And if the legends are true, those buried women, named and nameless, still walk the fields they were exiled from, waiting for the day when they're no longer called witches, just women. The Lost Colony of Roanoke, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. It begins with a dream. England's ambition to carve a permanent colony into the New World. A promise of riches, glory, and a foothold in a land overflowing with untamed opportunity. In 1587, that dream took root on the shores of Roanoke Island off the coast of what's now North Carolina, with over 100 settlers determined to build a new life. But by 1590, they were gone, vanished without a trace. No graves, no bodies, no evidence of war or flight. Just one cryptic word carved into a tree. Sora. This isn't just some frontier ghost story. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony is one of the oldest and most haunting mysteries in American history. It has baffled historians, archaeologists, and even presidents for centuries. But to understand what might have happened, we first have to rewind the clock back to a time when maps were hand-drawn. The Atlantic was a deadly gamble, and entire empires were racing for dominance. The Roanoke saga begins in 1584 when Queen Elizabeth I granted Sir Walter Raleigh a charter to establish a permanent English presence in North America. The first exploratory missions mapped the coast, scouted potential locations, and made contact with local indigenous tribes. Roanoke Island, strategically placed, fertile, and relatively protected, was chosen. By 1587, a third expedition was launched. This one, led by Governor John White, carried more than just men seeking glory. It brought families, wives, children, craftsmen, and farmers. This was meant to be a lasting settlement. Among them was White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, who would give birth to the first English child born in the Americas, Virginia Deer. But from the very beginning, the colony struggled. Relations with local tribes had soured from earlier English raids. Supplies were dwindling. The settlers begged Governor White to return to England and bring back reinforcements and food. Reluctantly, he left. What was supposed to be a short supply run turned into a 3-year absence, thanks to war with Spain and the threat of the Spanish Armada back home. When White finally returned in 1590, his colony was gone. Roanoke was eerily quiet, houses dismantled, not destroyed, fortifications gone, not burned. There were no signs of violence, disease, or haste, just that strange carving. Cord in on one tree and simply CRO on another nearby. To White, it was a sign. Before he left, he had instructed the colonists to carve a message if they had to relocate. If they were in danger, they were to include a symbol, a Maltese cross. There was no cross. Did that mean they left willingly? Croton was the name of an island to the south. Today, it's Hatteras Island, and also the name of a friendly native tribe that had assisted previous English expeditions. White wanted to sail there immediately, but a storm forced his crew to abandon the search. He would never return to the New World, and the fate of the lost colony became an enduring enigma. Over the centuries, theories piled up. Some say the settlers were slaughtered by hostile tribes. Others claim they were absorbed into the Croatan people, living out their lives in peace and anonymity. There are even accounts from early Jamestown colonists and native oral traditions describing pale-kinned, blue-eyed individuals living among indigenous groups in the Carolinas. Was this the bloodline of Roanoke hidden in plain sight? Some archaeologists believe parts of the colony may have moved inland, following rivers into the dense forests, perhaps to escape Spanish scouts or to find more favorable farmland. Excavations at Site X, near the Albemarle Sound, have uncovered European artifacts dating to the right time period. Early ceramics, gun parts, even jewelry, but nothing definitively links them to Roanoke. It's as if the colonists simply dissolved into the land, but not all explanations are so grounded. Over the years, Roanoke has attracted supernatural interpretations. The word cryotone itself has taken on eerie associations. It's popped up at the center of other strange disappearances, inscribed in Amelia Earhart's journal before her flight, etched into a post at the site of Ambrose Bierce's vanishing in Mexico, and even scribbled on the last page of horror writer Edgar Allan Poe's notes before his unexplained death. Coincidence? Maybe? Or perhaps Roanoke's mystery has stained history like a ripple in time. Then there's the tale of the Dare stones. Starting in the 1930s, dozens of carved stones surfaced in Georgia and the Carolinas, allegedly inscribed by Eleanor Dare. One stone described the deaths of the colonists, including Virginia Dare. Another marked a grave site. If real, these would be some of the most important colonial artifacts ever found, but many were quickly exposed as forgeries. A few remain debated. Are they elaborate hoaxes or the final cries of a forgotten colony? More recently, advanced technologies have reignited interest. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial LAR surveys, and satellite imaging have been used to scan the Outer Banks and surrounding mainland. They've uncovered remnants of ancient native villages, buried structures, and unexplored potential dig sites, but still no smoking gun. What keeps this mystery alive isn't just the lack of evidence. It's the eerie stillness of it all. Most lost civilizations leave behind clues, ruins, skeletons, remnants of violence or disease. But Roanoke, it left behind nothing but a word. No final message, no farewell, just silence. It's that absence that makes the lost colony feel less like a failed expedition and more like an event frozen in myth. Were they saved? Were they slaughtered? Did they vanish into the wilderness or into legend? Maybe we'll never know. But every time the wind brushes through the trees of Roanoke Island and the waves crash along the Carolina coast, it feels like the land itself is still keeping a secret. A 400-year-old whisper echoing through time. The Great Serpent Mound of Virginia. Nestled deep in the shadowy hollows of the Shenandoah Valley, a forgotten shape winds through the forest floor, almost hidden, almost erased. To the untrained eye, It's nothing more than a subtle rise in the earth. But to those who know where to look, it's something far stranger. A massive serpentine formation of soil and stone that mirrors the ancient effigy mounds found across the American Midwest. It's called the Great Serpent Mound of Virginia, though it's rarely mentioned in textbooks, and some even deny it exists. But local legends, strange alignments, and recent discoveries suggest otherwise. Beneath the soil of Virginia, an ancient story may be sleeping. Let's rewind for a moment. The more famous Great Serpent Mound lies in Ohio, a gigantic earthen structure over 1,300 feet long, coiled into the shape of a snake with an open mouth swallowing what looks like an egg. That mound has been studied for centuries. Astronomical alignments, possible burial chambers, and spiritual symbolism. It's all there. But in Virginia, a far less documented version may have existed, largely ignored, dismissed, or simply lost to time. So why do people believe it's real? It starts with indigenous oral traditions passed down through generations. The Monaco and Patton tribes who have lived in the region for thousands of years speak of the earth serpent or the sky snake, a winding guardian said to live beneath the hills. These stories aren't mere metaphors. Some accounts describe large earthworks resembling snakes tied to sacred sites where the sun, moon, and stars were honored. In some versions, the serpent is a protector of hidden knowledge, an earthly embodiment of something celestial. Then there's the curious case of an 18th century land surveyor named William Byrd II. Byrd, known for his detailed maps and eccentric writings, mentions seeing a great winding earthen form near a bend of the James River. His notes are cryptic but suggestive. He drew a rough sketch, a long curved ridge with a rounded head and tail, a shape disturbingly similar to the Ohio Serpent Mound. For decades, his mention was treated as a curiosity, nothing more. But as satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar became more accessible, amateur researchers and local historians began scanning remote parts of the Shenandoah and Piedmont regions. And what they found raised eyebrows. Linear and curved soil anomalies stretching hundreds of feet, unnatural elevations following serpentine patterns, and clusters of rocks arranged in repeating arcs. Could this be the lost mound Byrd saw? Some believe the site lies near Massanutten Mountain, where the terrain forms a natural enclosure and where indigenous people once gathered for ceremonies. Others point to the area near Natural Bridge, another ancient sacred site where strange stone circles and snake-like embankments have been found hidden beneath leaves and brush. These locations, while degraded by time and weather, appear to share structural characteristics with other known effigy mounds. But perhaps the most compelling aspect isn't the shape, it's the alignment. Those who have studied these potential serpent formations say they line up with the solstices, just like the Ohio Serpent Mound. During the summer solstice, sunlight breaks through the trees and lands directly on what would be the serpent's head. During the equinox, it follows the serpent's body, casting shifting shadows that resemble movement. Whether coincidence or design, this alignment suggests the builders had astronomical knowledge far more advanced than once thought. It gets weirder. Magnetometer scans in certain areas have revealed disruptions, intense magnetic shifts that shouldn't be there. At the Ohio Mound, similar magnetic anomalies were recorded, leading some to believe the sites were built over areas of natural power or energy convergence. If the Virginia site mirrors this, it could mean the builders intentionally harnessed or honored these unseen forces, ancient energy lines, ley lines, earth currents, whatever you want to call them. It implies a kind of technology or spiritual sensitivity we've only just begun to understand. And yet, official archaeology remains silent. Why? Partly because much of the evidence is fragmented, degraded, buried, but also because the concept challenges deeply held narratives. The idea that prehistoric indigenous peoples in Virginia, long before European contact, could have created massive astronomical earthworks is something mainstream history is often overlooked or dismissed. But for local native tribes, it's no surprise at all. Samanican elders speak quietly of a time before time when the sky serpents danced with the stars and the earth was shaped to honor them. They say the winding form is both a map and a message, a guide through the heavens and a story written in soil. And then there's the symbolism. The serpent across countless ancient cultures represents knowledge, rebirth, and the cycle of life. In Mesoamerican, Egyptian, and even Celtic mythology, the serpent bridges the earth and sky, a creature that slithers below, but watches above. If Virginia's ancestors carved a serpent into the land, it wasn't just decoration. It was sacred geometry, a prayer, a warning, a monument. One unexplored theory even suggests the Virginia serpent is older than the Ohio version, perhaps the original inspiration. That long before migration patterns carried mound builder culture westward, the first great symbols were laid in the eastern mountains, later forgotten or consumed by forest and flood. Today, hiking through the suspected mound area is an odd experience. The forest grows thick and uneven. In some spots, the air grows inexplicably cold. Animals go silent. Compass needles behave erratically. And every so often, visitors say they hear something beneath the ground. A low hum or faint vibration. Folklore maybe, but it adds to the atmosphere, the lingering feeling that something ancient is watching. In recent years, independent researchers and indigenous advocates have begun pushing for a full-scale archaeological survey. They want the site protected, studied, and respected, not paved over or ignored. But funding, recognition, and bureaucratic red tape continue to slow the effort. Meanwhile, the forest quietly reclaims the mound leaf by leaf, year by year. So, is the Great Serpent Mound of Virginia real? To some, it's undeniable. The patterns, the alignments, the stories, they all point to a lost sacred monument built by civilization we still don't fully understand. To others, it's a myth inflated by wishful thinking and coincidence. But either way, something stirs in Virginia's hills. Whether it's ancient me,